Fizzy here with another Kendama video. Today, got something very special for you. We're gonna do a deep dive on Kendama Shapes. So before we start, we're gonna do a quick vocab refresher. So the Kendama has two parts. We've got the tama, which is the ball, and we've got the ken. Today's video is going to focus on the ken. The balls tend to all be just about the same. There are differences. We'll do a future video deep diving the intricacies of the clear coats especially, but today's video we're going to focus on the ken. So when I first started playing kendama, when I discovered them, I really could not tell the difference between different kens. To me, they all pretty much just looked exactly the same. I don't know. They all have the spike on top. They've all got the three cups. You know, they all kind of go thick on the bottom into thin in the middle. So, you know, people would post that they like this shape better than that, and I just couldn't understand it because they just seemed identical. But the more you play, the more you notice all of the little nuances of each kendama shape. So we are in a golden age of kendama right now, and there are so many amazing brands that are making shapes that play really, really, really good. You really can't go wrong these days. If you buy a kendama that's been designed in the past couple years, you're gonna get something great no matter what. But there's so much out there. It is a lot to sort through. So I want to go through some of the main differences that you're going to see out there between the kendama shapes on the market, and then hopefully you will become a bit more of an expert on all of the differences between the different ken shapes. So the first thing I want to start with is size and scale. So I pulled out this Kirby kendama earlier, and it is, along with this Ozora Reshape 3, a little bit on the more traditional size and scale. And so the way you can really see what I'm talking about is if we pull out a more modern sized kendama. They have tended to be designed bigger. So let me grab this Origins blunt just to show you what I mean. So, you know, they look pretty much the same, but if you actually hold them up next to each other, you'll notice that, oh, that cup is actually just bigger, right, on this one. And then same with this, same with this. So everything is just a bit bigger on the blunt, right? So it actually ends up overall becoming quite a bit larger than this Ozora more traditionally sized shape. So a lot of the shapes you're going to see nowadays are trending in this direction, quite a bit bigger. So now what does that really mean? What does that entail? You know, is it just simply if you have bigger hands, a bigger shape will be nice? Well, there's actually a lot of consequences that come from the scale differences. And, you know, there are positives and negatives. It's all very subjective here, which kendama you're going to prefer. So you'll find out as you play a lot of shapes what you like. But when you start making the kendamas bigger, the number one thing that happens is the weight goes up. So a lot of these modern shapes you're going to find are quite a bit heavier than, you know, something like this. This is exactly 80 grams. This blunt, you're going to have a tough time finding one as low as 80 grams. This one is oak, so it's got to be like about 96 here. So it does affect the weight. Now the weight doesn't really matter. You can play kendama of any weight, but it does feel very different. It's quite a bit more of a workout, as you know, if you sesh hard on a heavier setup. The other thing you got to think about is, especially when they're scaling up parts of the kendama, but not the entire setup. For instance, making the Serato thicker here, or keeping the spike thin but making the base cup thick, what happens is the weight differences start to affect what we call the balance ratios. So there are a lot of tricks that involve some level of balance from your Ken, and depending on the way that these relationships between the weights and sizes of each part of your Ken interact, it's going to totally change the way that the Ken plays for all sorts of different tricks. Now you're going to find that some Kens are designed to be focused on certain tricks, and other ones will focus on other tricks, which will end up meaning that you can get two great Kens that play completely different and have different strengths and weaknesses. So what are we really talking about here? So number one is your flippability. So you're going to notice that some Kens are taller, some are shorter, some have wider serratos, some have thinner, some have thicker serratos and thinner. And all of these things are going to affect the way that this thing flips. So, if you have a shorter setup but with a very heavy serrato, that's going to flip real fast. If you have a taller setup, you might end up with a bit of a slower flip, not as tight flips. But there's so many different ways that the different aspects of your Ken interact to ultimately create that flip dynamic that you're going to have to play around with and notice all those differences. The other thing is the balance. So your Ken balancing on lighthouse, balancing on lunar, those size differences are all going to play into that. If you have a big, heavy serrato, it's going to be probably much better for lunar tricks. It's going to balance great, but that lighthouse balance might wobble off. It may be harder for the sling tricks. The thinner serratos that are not as good for lunar tend to be better for slinging. So there's all these different tricks that you want to kind of have your Ken be able to do, and so you have to decide which direction you really want to go with your Ken. But yeah, basically what people are going to be looking for is a Ken that can lunar and lighthouse and sling and juggle flip and do the taps and all that stuff. So there's definitely a lot to think about in terms of how each Ken is specified. So what else plays into those weights and balances other than the shape and size is the wood type. So you're going to notice that most Kens out there are within about 5-6 main wood types, but there are a lot of special Kens of so many different kinds of wood. But the most common ones you're going to see a lot of maple, a lot of beech. You're going to see a lot of ash. You're going to see bamboo. Those are probably the 4 most common you're going to see. There are definitely a lot of other really cool wood types that you can get in your kendama. I love the Japanese keyaki Zelkova wood. It has a beautiful grain, beautiful sound, and there's all sorts of cool wood splices that can be done to combine different types of wood. Here's a maple with a wenge splice. So yeah, here's another maple with a wenge splice here. So those are all really cool. And when you splice those woods in, it's not simply an aesthetic difference. It really does affect those balance ratios. So here you've got a strip in the serrato of a completely different wood type in there. So this maple is actually really lightweight maple, and this is a heavier wenge splice. So it's actually making this serrato essentially act as if it is a bigger serrato than it really is, which is gonna allow you to have great lunar balance. So that's something to look for, is these splices aren't simply just for looks. They actually can have quite the impact. I've got this Mugen set up here. It's got some spliced cups here. So that's the other thing you can do, is splice onto these cup rims. And what that is going to affect is these stall points. So that's another thing that's very important to think about comparing these different Kens, is the angles and sizes of these stall points, but also what type of wood they are made out of. If you have a very smooth maple stall point, that's going to be quite a lot slipperier than a beech or bamboo or this kayaki stall point. It's going to just stick a lot better if it's one of those. And on that note, we also have some interesting textural differences that can come up that will affect the stalls. So one of the cool things that they're doing now is they're leaving these Kens unsanded. So here's a question answer shape with an unsanded maple Ken. So it's not so smooth like that super sanded polished maple, and that's going to make the stall points a lot better. You'll notice here also that this ridge is present. There's a flat edge here. That's what we call a stepped cup. So you're going to see that as well. That's another design choice that is going to help a lot, specifically with slinging. It gives your finger a little something to grab onto, so that when you're doing those slings, that's going to be a huge help. So to recap, what have we talked about so far? We've got the size and scale of the Ken. So check out this answer shape with the very large cup. Compare that to just about any other cup and you're gonna dwarf it there. But it's not simply that this answer shape is just larger all around than these other shapes, because as you can see, this is very thin here, and especially here in the middle of the serrato. So it's these ratios. We've got the very wide ends and the thin middle. That's gonna play very, very differently than this blunt, for instance, with the large, thick serrato. The cup sizes are fairly similar here, but the answer's got bigger cups and thinner on the inside here. So it's gonna completely play differently. And then we also talked about these stall points, which some of them will be thicker, some of them will be straight up flat like that, while as others will have an angle to them. You can kind of see the difference there. And then we've got the stall points here we haven't really discussed. So there's the ring as well as the handle. Rings tend to be all over the place. There's sharp ones, there's rounded ones, there's flat ones. People don't do a lot of ring stall tricks, so I wouldn't worry too much about what your ring stall looks like, but it will affect the way it feels in your hand while you're holding it, while you're flipping it. So it is definitely an important design feature as well. I like these slightly rounded ring stalls. They feel real nice when you're juggling, but the flat ones can be good for when you're actually trying to do the stall and balance a thing on there. It sits a bit better. So, you know, you got to play around with that. And then the handle stalls can also be very different. You see this blunt has a very thick handle stall. There's handle stalls that have more of a ridge between them and the Ken there, a sharper angle. So there's so much to think about that's going to totally change how your Ken plays.